So what I'm going to do is to talk about safeguarding chronic dependent drinkers, and in particular self-neglecting dependent drinkers. This is a huge issue for 10 minutes, so I can only touch the surface. And what I'm really going to do is to say, A, this is a really important issue when we're looking at safeguarding. I'm going to look at a very particular problem with drinkers and the issue of lifestyle choice, point to some useful resources, and a point again to a particular piece of work that we are doing to move us forward on this. I think in thinking about this work, it's always useful to start with real people in the real world. And a very powerful SAR for me is one that comes from Lancashire, about adult D. And she was a woman in her 50s who was found dead on a bare mattress in a sparsely furnished bedroom in a house that was otherwise piled high with rubbish and drinks containers strewn everywhere. And she was a woman with a significant alcohol problem. And I think we do owe it to people like her to think about how we can better protect, better safeguard these individuals. But the reason I focused down onto this particular SAR is because it highlighted another important issue. And what the SAR highlighted was that some of the professionals who were working with her seemed to believe that the way she was living was the way she wanted to live. To use Michael's phrase, this was seen as being her lifestyle choice. And I think if we are going to work effectively with this client group, we do need to challenge that notion that people are choosing to live like this. Now, the real starting point for the work that we've done in this area is this document here, the so-called Blue Light Manual. This was published when we were Alcohol Concern, and it sets out tools, techniques, ideas for working with change-resistant and dependent drinkers. And its basic message is very simple. We shouldn't write off people who don't want to change their drinking. There are things that you, that we, that professionals can do that will make a difference. However, over the years that we've been working on the Blue Light Project, we are as aware as anyone that at the end of that pathway, once you've tried everything in the manual, once you've tried all those tools and techniques, there is still going to be a group of people who are not changing and whose vulnerability means they require more structured frameworks to manage their behaviour. Things like the CARE Act, the Mental Capacity Act. And the place where we see these clients most clearly is in the Safeguarding Adult Reviews. And in 2019, Alcohol Change UK published this document, Learning from Tragedies, which undertook an analysis of a randomly chosen sample of 41 SARs that were published in 2017. And we were looking at those SARs to identify the role that alcohol misuse played in them. And in 11 of those cases, alcohol was a problem for the adult being safeguarded. That is 25% of the cases. Now, the reason I stress that 25% figure is because in the ADAS analysis of SARs, led by Michael and Susie, one of the questions they looked at was what proportion of those SARs were about people with an alcohol-related concern. And perhaps surprisingly, in statistical terms at least, they found exactly the same rates as we'd found in our study, 25%. And my hunch is that when the government enacted the CARE Act back in 2014, there was no expectation that substance misuse would be so central, but it is. And anyone working in the safeguarding arena, anyone who is potentially going to raise safeguarding concerns needs to be aware of the role that alcohol can play in safeguarding. Professionals need a much better understanding of the legal structures that can support and manage these very challenging clients. I think for many years the alcohol field has been a particularly legally illiterate field. Therefore, over the last 2 or 3 years, Michael Preston Shooter and myself have been working with Alcohol Change UK to develop a national briefing document to help professionals to use legal frameworks to manage this client group. And I'm pleased to say that this was finally published just over a year ago. It is now freely available on the Alcohol Change UK website, as is the Blue Light Manual, so you can freely download both. And it has already, I think, had a significant impact on thinking and practice. Now, what I want to do in the remaining time that I've got is to focus down on this issue of lifestyle choice. Because if we are to work effectively with this client group, we do need to challenge that choice paradigm. We need to challenge the idea that this client group are choosing a chaotic or self-neglecting lifestyle. They are not simply making unwise decisions. Rather, they face very real barriers to change and to engagement, and professionals need to understand that if we are to move forward. And over the years that I've been working on this theme, I have often said to people that I think that this slide here is probably the most important slide that I present, because if workers don't understand this, they won't go anywhere with these clients. Because what we need to understand is that many of these drinkers are not choosing this lifestyle. Rather, they are at the centre of a perfect storm of physical things that are going on, which are getting in the way of the moving forward. There are real physical barriers to change. For example, well known and well understood, depression. Alcohol is a depressant to the central nervous system, so it's not surprising that 70% of dependent drinkers report themselves to be depressed or low mood, a barrier to moving forward. Alcohol-related brain damage and alcohol-related brain injury affects a huge swathe of this client group. Probably 40% have signs of damage caused by the long-term consumption of alcohol. Korsakoff syndrome in its ultimate form. But that figure is dwarfed by the 50% of dependent drinkers who have got injuries to their head and brain from things like falls, fights, fits. And these two things in combination mean that even at relatively low levels, these clients are becoming over time more and more like punch-drunk boxers who are going to find it harder and harder to manage themselves and engage with cognitive behavioural processes required by alcohol treatment. Liver disease is very common in this group and makes people tired, low energy levels. It also causes confusion, as does pancreatitis and UTIs, which are common in this group. Poor sleep impacts on cognition and obviously makes you tired, another demotivator. Poor nutrition is a big impact on cognition and again causes depression. And the real joker in the pack, the one that people simply don't think enough about in adult services, is the impact of fetal alcohol damage. Many in this client group will be adults who have grown up with the mild to moderate learning disabilities or behaviour disorders associated with maternal drinking during pregnancy. And there are some quite stunning statistics about this. It has been suggested that 28%, up to 28% of adult prisoners in Britain have got fetal alcohol damage. 30% of people with fetal alcohol damage go on to develop their own substance misuse problem. And this is impacting on many people that you are seeing in adult services, and we're not recognising the impact that has on their ability to care for themselves, to manage themselves, and indeed on things like their mental capacity. But it's there. And on top of all that, this client group will be physically dependent on alcohol and will be experiencing the compulsion associated with alcohol dependency. It is very easy to view this group of drinkers as choosing their lifestyle. As one colleague said to me once, this man just likes living in a chaotic and dirty setting. The situation is much more complex than that. There are very real physical barriers alongside the world of other things like trauma, social circumstances, homelessness, coercion and control, which also impact on their choices. But this client group are facing very real barriers, which means their situation is much more complex than simply choosing to drink. As a result of that work on barriers, one of the things we've done, and this was really flagged up in the safeguarding project that I did with Michael, is that we do need a much better understanding of cognitive damage in drinkers. And we are at the moment, I've literally completed the final draft of this document, and hopefully in the next few months this will be published and will be accompanied by training which will support people to work more effectively with cognitive impairment in drinkers. As I said, that is only scratching a tiny part of the surface of this huge issue, but I hope it opens up a number of avenues that people may want to explore. So Vida, thank you for the opportunity.